Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place you wouldn't normally associate with soul-searching chats, herbal medicine, and unexpected career advice. But in the bustling neighborhoods of the Ottoman Empire, that's exactly what you'd find at your local barbershop. You slip into a shaded corner street, where fig trees lean lazily over plastered walls and lazy cats warm themselves on cobbled stone. The scent of boiled cloves, lemon soap, and rosewater floats in the air. You hear the soft, metallic ring of a razor being stropped, followed by the gentle hum of a man reciting poetry to no one in particular. You push open the door, and yes, you're expected to bow a little at the barber's nod. Because this isn't just someone who trims beards. This man may also be your surgeon, your therapist, your marriage counselor, and possibly your secret keeper. You probably won't survive this without accidentally confessing something you didn't mean to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit on a low wooden stool as the barber motions you forward. His fingers are stained from rosewood oil and tobacco, and his eyes have the kind of calm you only develop after decades of listening to the endless complaints of humanity. His voice is soft, yet carries the firm edge of someone who has seen things, usually through a lather of shaving cream and a half-trimmed mustache. It's 1584, give or take a decade. You're in Constantinople, but the locals still fondly call it Istanbul. The Ottoman Empire stretches from the edges of Hungary down to Yemen. And yet here you are, focused entirely on one man who holds a razor in one hand and a boiled cloth in the other. He doesn't ask you why you've come in today. That would be rude. Instead, he dips a rag in steaming water and lets the silence coax your truth out. This is your third time this month, and your beard hasn't grown enough to really justify the visit. But it's not about the shave, and the barber knows it. He doesn't comment on your too frequent returns. Instead, he adjusts the mirror so it flatters your cheeks. Across the empire, barbers have more functions than just grooming. They pull teeth. They set minor bone injuries. They lance boils. They even treat melancholia, usually with herbal tonics, or just a very long conversation. Some Ottoman barbers are even licensed to perform minor surgeries. A few less legal ones dabble in black market circumcisions and battlefield amputations. You'll be glad today's appointment is just for your sideburns. You glance around the small tiled shop. Above the brass sink sits a shelf holding strange bottles. Rose oil, vinegar, pomegranate vinegar, carob paste, dried figs, and something suspiciously labelled goat's breath. Behind the counter is a hookah nobody actually smokes. It's mostly ornamental, like your uncle's golf trophies. In this era, doctors are few and expensive. So, for most folks, the barber is the closest they'll get to medical help or emotional support. Historians still argue whether this reliance was due more to access or trust. After all, how many people let someone press a blade against their throat every week? As your face is lathered in creamy soap, the barber hums a tune. Something old, a folk song from Anatolia about a shepherd who falls in love with a melon seller. You close your eyes. The warmth of the cloth opens your pores, and maybe your soul a little. Your wife, the barber finally says in a voice as smooth as his shaving foam. She's still angry about the chicken, you grunt. He continues, next time, you buy a second chicken, one for the neighbors to gossip about, one for your stomach. He chuckles before pulling the razor across your jawline with practiced grace. Each motion is deliberate, like calligraphy drawn in reverse. You remember hearing that, in some cities, barbers were paid extra to read aloud from newspapers or poetry during sessions. Not here. This man prefers silence and the occasional proverb. A man who shaves in silence, he says, leaves less blood. It's a well-worn joke. You both smile. He uses it with everyone. In fact, if this were a few towns over, the barber might also be reciting dreams to interpret, a practice popular among Sufi-leaning barbers who saw dream work as part of inner cleansing. That's not the case here. But your barber keeps a small book in the drawer, filled with scribbled notes about people's recurring dreams. He says it helps him predict weather or personality disorders. Depends on the day. Historians still debate how deeply barbers were trained in formal medicine versus folk knowledge. In some cities, the lines between scholar and stylist blur more than your neckline. He dabs your face with rosewater and gives your hairline one last touch with a tiny comb, carved from olive wood. Then, he leans in, close enough that you smell cardamom on his breath, and says, "You should speak to your brother again. No fight is worth unshaved guilt." You nod, though you're unsure how he knows about the argument. You didn't mention it. Or maybe you did. Somehow, in a place like this, it all comes out eventually. The shave ends not with fanfare, but with a moment of silence, the kind that feels like the pause before a prayer. You stand, drop a few coins into a shallow dish, and nod your thanks. And as you walk back into the warm street, your face tingling from the razor's path, you realize something quietly profound, that maybe, just maybe, your heart feels slightly lighter than your beard. You step back into the street, face still warm and smooth, and the sense of clove and soap trailing faintly behind you. The world outside feels slightly softer, like it's been sanded down, but your mind drifts right back to that tiny shop, where time slowed and the world leaned in close to listen. Ottoman barbershops weren't just places to tidy your appearance. They were sensory havens, small, aromatic theatres where water steamed in bronze basins. Old men muttered proverbs under their breath, and boys fanned away flies with strips of palm leaf. You duck into another barber's shop just down the hill. This, one smaller, darker, and tucked behind a crooked fruit stall. For the sake of curiosity, of course. And maybe because your upper lip still feels a little uneven. This shop smells different. Orange blossom water, musty old books, and what you're pretty sure is dried mint. The barber, older than the last, wears an embroidered vest that's seen more decades than you'd admit. He doesn't smile much, but he nods you in. He's already heating the copper kettle before you sit. A basin carved from alabaster waits on a stool. Steam curls upward, fogging the mirror slightly. The walls are lined with mismatched shelves stacked with jars, crushed walnut powder for exfoliating, something labelled camel gum, and what appears to be dried rose petals, though they might also be hibiscus. You won't ask. It's not that kind of relationship. Barbers like this weren't just functional. They curated an entire sensory experience. Ottoman men didn't simply drop in for a trim. They lingered, sipped cardamom tea, discussed the latest palace rumours, and traded poems like currency. You've barely sat down before this barber hands you a tiny porcelain cup of dark, almost syrupy tea. It's sweet, and it tastes like a hug from your great-uncle. The lather this time is richer, slightly spicier, and it leaves a cooling sensation. "Clove oil," he mutters, "also good for toothaches." And nosy neighbours. He begins to sharpen his razor. The rhythmic swish-swish of leather strop against blade is almost hypnotic. It's the kind of sound you could fall asleep to, somewhere between a lullaby and a warning. This barber doesn't talk much, but he hums. You catch the tune, a folk song from Edirne, something about a goat who escapes a wedding feast. You try not to laugh. It would ruin your jawline. What's fascinating is that even though these barbershops served similar functions throughout the empire, they each developed their own little quirks. Some were known for their perfect beard tapers. Others were famous for storytelling, or their homemade aftershaves, or even political satire whispered between shave strokes. Your current barber is known for silence, and his mildly alarming knowledge of local birth dates. Historians still debate how barbers selected their scents and recipes. Some records suggest passed-down family traditions. Others imply a more regional, herbalist influence. Either way, you can bet that if a man owned a shop in the Ottoman Empire, he had a signature smell, and you'd know it with your eyes closed. The barber dabs your temples with what feels like lavender oil. You ask why. He shrugs, keeps away bad thoughts, he says, and gestures to the razor, and calms the skin. You believe him, or you want to. Barbers were also hosts in a way that today's salons don't quite manage. You weren't just a customer, you were a guest. In return for your loyalty and your ears staying still, the barber might offer advice, drop bits of Ottoman poetry, or throw in a free eyebrow trim when times were good. The whole affair could last an hour or longer if the conversation, or the weather, required it. Barbers also competed quietly. One might add a pinch of musk to his towels. Another might light a single clove-scented coal in the corner brazier to scent the air. And if you dared to switch shops, well, your regular barber would notice. And the next time you came in, the towel might feel just a little colder. The cut, a little closer. The silence, longer. And yet, despite their cozy atmosphere, these shops weren't always quaint. They could be political, charged with whispered dissent, or gossip about the local governor's latest blunder. One careless comment could mean a visit from the palace guards. So barbers mastered the art of listening without reacting, of agreeing without agreeing, of nodding without nodding. That's part of their magic. You might say something deeply personal, even embarrassing, but the barber, he simply rinses the blade, folds the towel, and hums another tune. The silence is louder than judgment. In fact, it was common for people to admit things in the chair that they wouldn't even tell their spouses. And because Ottoman society put such emphasis on discretion, the barber's nod became a language of its own. A pause, a glance, a single raised eyebrow meant more than a whole sermon. One traveller from Venice once wrote, "An Ottoman barber may know a man's soul better than his priest." Historians argue whether this was poetic exaggeration or just a Venetian who cried a little during his shave. You glance up, and your barber is done. He wipes your face clean with a fresh towel and pats your cheeks dry with something that smells faintly of basil and coal dust. You thank him, and he hands you a small, twisted piece of paper containing what he calls a pocket charm, pressed rose petals and something that might be cinnamon bark. You don't ask what it's for. You already feel better just having it, and as you step outside once more, warmed by tea and wrapped in the lingering scent of herbs, you realize again, this wasn't about grooming. This was about being witnessed, not judged, not scolded, just seen. And in the Ottoman Empire, sometimes that was enough to carry a man through the week. You decide to walk a bit through the narrow lanes of the quarter, letting your face cool. In the late morning air, when you suddenly recall something from earlier, the way your first barber mentioned leeches as casually as he might mention olive oil. Yes, leeches, little squirmy creatures that Ottoman barbers actually kept in jars. And not just for shock value. You pass a small shop with an open door and a faded wooden sign, a carved razor crossed with what looks like a serpent. Inside, two boys are scrubbing towels in a copper basin while an older man, white-haired and sun-spotted, sharpens a scalpel under a skylight. You hesitate at the threshold. But curiosity wins, as it often does. You take a seat and notice the jars on the shelf. Cloudy glass filled with what appear to be real, live leeches. One of them flicks its body lazily, as if waiting for a warm ankle. The barber turns to you with a grin that says, "Ah, you've come for something different." Barbers in the Ottoman Empire, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries, often functioned as unofficial doctors. They performed bloodletting using leeches, cupping, or small incisions, believing that releasing bad blood could cure anything from fevers to melancholia. Today, of course, you'd probably prefer a thermometer and an ibuprofen. But back then, your barber might just be your best chance at feeling whole again. The leech jar is warm to the touch. He gently removes one, speaks to it in Turkish, yes, really, and places it just behind your ear. A moment of disgust passes over you, but then a calm, slightly cold sensation takes its place. The barber hums a lullaby, as if the leech requires a soundtrack. And this is the moment. You're vulnerable. There's a parasite clinging to your skin, drawing your blood, and you are oddly okay with it. The barber wipes your forehead and says, "This one likes you. She's working through something." Was he joking? Hard to say. Historians still argue whether Ottoman barbers believed in the physical science of bloodletting or leaned more toward traditional humoral medicine inherited from ancient Greek and Islamic teachings. Either way, the practice stuck around, especially in poorer neighborhoods where doctors were scarce and untrustworthy. Meanwhile, the barber is talking about the weather. Too dry, he says. Everyone's coughing. I've had 7 noses bleed this week. You nod. He adds, also, your sister should marry, the one with the thin eyebrows. She's clever. You didn't tell him about your sister. You didn't even mention your family. But again, barbers hear things. From you, from neighbors, from the merchant who comes in every Tuesday after market day and gossips like it's a sport. The second leech is removed and returned to the jar, slightly fatter now. You feel lighter, maybe because you've lost a few drops of blood, maybe because someone is finally taking care of you, even if it's in the weirdest possible way. Not all barbers used leeches, of course. Some preferred cupping, heating small glass or ceramic cups and placing them on your back to create suction. You'd look like you got into a fight with an octopus, but people swore it cured headaches, back pain, even stress. Some barbers performed, both on the same customer, leeches to drain, cups to stimulate, and always the conversation flowed. Not just pleasantries, deep stuff. Men confessed affairs, secret fears, night terrors. One scholar wrote that Ottoman barbers were priests with razors, able to absolve you simply by asking, "You've been sleeping poorly, haven't you?" You blink, because yes, you have been sleeping poorly. You didn't say anything. He just knew. The barber dabs your neck with a soft cloth soaked in rosewater and mint. It tingles a little. Bad thoughts gather behind the ears, he explains, as if this is common knowledge. You nod slowly. Of course they do. There's a moment of stillness. Outside, you hear a mule braying and someone bargaining over grapes. Inside, the only sound is the leech wriggling back into the warmth of its jar. The barber lights a stick of incense. You breathe in the smoke, musk, cinnamon, something else you can't name. What's even more surprising, these barbers weren't considered low class, despite their gritty work. They were respected. In some neighborhoods, the barber knew more secrets than the local imam. He certainly knew more about your mother-in-law's bunions. Barbershops were also places where power could shift. If a janissary officer or provincial tax collector came in for a shave and let something slip, some palace intrigue, an insult, a rumor, it could spread through the empire faster than pigeons. Some barbers, especially in cities like Damascus or Cairo, were even suspected of passing intel to the palace. Quietly, skillfully, and often while applying beard oil. Historians still debate how widespread barber spying was, but records do show that some barbers ended up with mysteriously large homes or suddenly closed shop and moved to a quieter city. Ahem, the shave is done, the blood is wiped. The advice, both medical and emotional, has been dispensed. The barber hands you a small sachet of herbs. Boil it tonight, he says. Pour the water into your bath, and don't think of your father's voice while you do it. That's oddly specific. You nod anyway. You step out into the light again, cheeks flushed, mind foggy in a peaceful way. You pass through steam, blades, blood, and banter, and emerged. Better, lighter. You're not sure, but one thing's certain. You will come back. Not just for the shave, not just for the rituals, but for the way he looked at you like you mattered, like your burdens were real and treatable, with the right mixture of leeches, lavender, and low-stakes gossip. You walk slower now. You're not in a rush. The next barbershop isn't going anywhere. You meander toward the main square now, the sound of vendors calling out for figs and boiled chickpeas echoing between narrow alleyways. But your thoughts drift again, not toward food, but back to that sharp blade gliding across your throat earlier in the morning. You trusted the barber completely, even as he hovered near the softest parts of your neck with a razor that hadn't seen a safety guard in its entire existence. It's strange, really. In the modern world, trust is a hard-earned currency. And yet in the Ottoman Empire, it was often given freely to the man who could nick an artery by accident, or perhaps on purpose. You wonder how that trust came to be. Barbers didn't just earn it with clean cuts. They earned it with routine, with repetition. You'd see the same man every week, often for years. Maybe your father saw him before you. Maybe he shaved your uncle on the morning of his wedding. Maybe he was there when your cousin got the bad news about his merchant ship that never made it to Alexandria. That kind of intimacy isn't built in conversation. It's forged in rhythm, in warm cloths and daily greetings and the soft rustle of cotton as a towel is folded just so. The barbershop wasn't just a space for grooming. It was a theatre of ritual. You entered with dust on your face and worry on your shoulders. You left cleaner, quieter, and somehow more centered, even if the beard hadn't grown much. In Ottoman society, these rituals mattered. They were small but vital affirmations of structure in a world ruled by hierarchy, religion, and the chaos of commerce. You could skip a merchant meeting, you might even skip your cousin's wedding, but you didn't skip your Friday shave. Ah yes, Friday, the holy day. And that's where we arrive now. Every Friday morning, just after sunrise but before the first azan floats across the city's rooftops, the barbershops begin to buzz. Men line up down the street, sandals tapping against the stone in anticipation. The goal isn't just to look sharp for prayer at the mosque. It's about cleanliness, about showing respect to God, to your community, and maybe even to yourself. In fact, some barbers would open exclusively for the Friday crowd. No teeth pulling, no melancholia treatments, just fast, clean shaves with fresh towels and a hint of musk oil dabbed gently at the temples. For some, it was the only shave they'd get all week. Historians still debate whether this weekly ritual stemmed more from religious obligation or cultural momentum. Islamic tradition emphasizes personal hygiene, purity before prayer, but it was the barber who brought that purity into reach, especially for the working class, and there was status in that shave too. A well-trimmed beard showed discipline, a smooth jaw suggested a man who had time to care for himself, and the money to pay someone to do it. There was pride in those lines, even if the person drawing them was humming a slightly off-key version of a folk ballad from Bursa. The barbershop on Fridays was a scene unto itself. There'd be old men arguing over the best kind of olive oil to rub into the scalp. A middle-aged tailor nervously tapping his sandal, hoping to impress a widow he'd be praying next to. A young boy fidgeting in the corner, about to get his first real shave, eyebrows already furrowed like a veteran janissary, and the barber, calm as always. Towel draped over his shoulder, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal forearms dusted with hair clippings and rose oil. His eyes sharp, even if his humor was dry. He worked through the crowd with quiet confidence, moving from face to face like a scribe copying an ancient manuscript. You sit in that shop now. It's not Friday, but the vibe lingers. A group of older men chat softly near the window. One's reading aloud from a thin book of poetry. Another sips tea and nods at the meter. A third just snores gently, clearly there more for the mood than the maintenance. This is where the emotional bond grows strongest. You're not just being shaved, you're being seen. Your presence confirms that you still belong here, still participate in the rhythms of life. The razor, for all its danger, becomes a symbol of safety, of predictability. There's even a joke barbers tell to newcomers. I only cut with razors I've cried over, they say, tapping the blade like a prized violin. The implication is clear. Emotion is part of the work. You don't just wield a razor, you understand it, you feel with it. You guide it not just over skin, but over the peaks and valleys of another person's life, and you start to notice the signs, the way your barber slows the blade when you're upset, how he presses a towel to your temple when you mention your brother's illness. He doesn't offer solutions, he doesn't give sermons, he simply reacts, minimally, subtly, with the kind of grace that only comes from shaving thousands of stories, off thousands of faces. Sometimes the barber does speak, but it's not about you. He tells you about a neighbor's cat who's gone missing, or about the weather in Edirne, dry again, or the new governor's habit of sneezing during public speeches. You laugh. He doesn't. He's focused on the cut. But somehow, these tiny, meaningless exchanges ground you. They create space between the heavy thoughts, like little stepping stones between rivers of worry. One traveller, writing from Istanbul in the 18th century, remarked, "The barber seems to hold a mirror not only to my face but to my nature." Historians still argue whether that was metaphor or just someone really impressed with their cheekbones. The shave ends, a final splash of cool water, a dab of something sharp and sweet at the nape of your neck. And as you stand, the barber gently brushes a few stray hairs from your shoulder and says, "Same time next week?" You nod. Of course, you wouldn't miss it. You step outside once again, your neck still tingling from the splash of rose water. A light breeze catches your collar as you walk away from the shop, but the calmness lingers like the faint trail of cardamom oil left behind your ears. You pass. A young man on the corner, freshly shaven, clearly proud of it. He's smiling to himself as he balances a bag of walnuts on one shoulder and a clay jug of milk on the other. He probably just came from a different barber down the street, and if you pause to ask, he'd tell you, "Oh, this one's better, with sideburns. The other, better for heartbreak." There's something unspoken in Ottoman society about refusing a shave when it's offered by a friend or relative. It's more than hygiene. It's a gesture of connection, an act of mutual respect, like breaking bread or loaning a coat in winter. A shared shave says, "I care enough to touch your face with a blade and not kill you." High praise, really. Imagine, your cousin comes over, worried sick about his failing textile stall. You don't tell him to write a letter to the governor. No, you sit him down, pull out your father's old razor, and shave his beard clean, in silence, maybe with a few muttered jokes about goats. But in that quiet moment, the tension eases. He rises lighter, not just trimmed but soothed. This wasn't limited to homes either. Within Ottoman society, the act of offering a shave could symbolize allegiance, reconciliation, or even repentance. Soldiers shaved each other before battle. Brothers shaved each other after long separations. And when someone passed away, the Yas, barber shaved the body clean in preparation for burial, a sacred final ritual. Historians still debate whether barbers were trained formally in these rites, or if the practices were passed down orally. Either way, it was understood, intuitively, that the razor meant more than mere grooming. There were even etiquette rules. If someone offered to shave you and you declined, that could be taken as an insult, a rejection of their hospitality. And if you shaved too soon before visiting an elder's home, it might suggest you didn't consider their barbership worthy of your trust. The politics of shaving, subtle but sharp. In cities like Sarajevo, Aleppo, or Bursa, men would even give shaves in public squares during festivals, for free. It was part performance, part service. The barber might wear a sash, crack jokes, or juggle razors to show off. And yet once you sat in the chair, the jokes stopped. The world narrowed. The intimacy began. There's a story from Damascus about a barber who offered to shave a judge right before Friday prayer. Mid-shave, the judge confessed something, maybe personal, maybe political. No one knows exactly what. But afterward, the judge declared that Barber, the most trustworthy man in the city, gave him a plaque. That barber never paid taxes again. This is the kind of quiet reverence that built around the profession, not because barbers demanded it, but because they earned it one shave at a time. And sometimes, a shave was a way of marking change. Imagine a man returning home after a long journey. He might go straight to the mosque, or he might stop first at his barber, get the dust of the road scrubbed from his face, let someone slice away the old version of himself so he could walk home new, or consider a man turning 40 after a decade of beard growth to show his piety. He decides, quietly, to go clean-shaven again. He doesn't announce it, he just shows. Up at the barber shop, the barber says nothing, But he changes the oil. He sharpens the blade longer. He lays a second towel across the shoulders. The moment deserves respect. Barbers also served as keepers of style, not in a flashy way, but as subtle trendsetters. In the Ottoman court, certain beard styles were favoured at different times. The imam's edge, a clean-cut chin with bushy sides, was all the rage in the early 1600s. Later, the crescent beard took over, a delicate curve from ear to jawline, and of course, moustaches. Always moustaches. Your barber knew what was in vogue, but he also knew you. He wouldn't force a crescent beard on a square face. He wouldn't thin your eyebrows unless you were a poet, or a young man hoping to become one. In that way, the barber was a kind of low-level aesthetic philosopher. He read your soul and reflected it on your cheeks. One Ottoman satirist even joked, "A good barber shapes your face to match your future sins." Historians still argue whether that was an insult or a compliment. Possibly both. You reach another barbershop, this one squeezed between a bakery and a fabric stall. The door creaks open and the smell hits you instantly. A mix of lavender, burnt, sugar, and warm metal. Inside, a grandfatherly man is shaving someone who looks far too young to need it. But the boy is grinning ear to ear, proud to be part of the tradition. In a corner, two men sip thick coffee from tiny cups and talk in. Low voices about something serious, death maybe, or taxes, it's hard to tell. But the atmosphere is respectful, gentle, even holy. You take a seat, not because you need another shave, but because you don't want to break the rhythm of this strange, calming day. The barber looks over and nods like he's been expecting you. He tosses a warm towel over your shoulders and whispers, "New season, new beard?" You smile and say, "Why not?" The towel around your shoulders is still warm, the kind of warmth that seeps slowly through your collar and convinces your body to relax. You lean back as the barber places a small pillow behind your neck. Not too firm, not too soft. Just right. Like everything else today. He begins to lather your face, this time with a brush made of horsehair, its handle carved from sandalwood and polished to a shine. The soap has a hint of bitter orange and something else, maybe clove or black seed oil. You close your eyes and let the quiet take over. In the background, you hear someone slowly reading out a list of names. Ottoman barbershops often served as informal news hubs. Not the loud, gossip-driven kind, but more like whisper networks for births, deaths, trades, and military movements. Some barbers kept little notepads tucked beneath their aprons, scribbling names and dates passed to them by soldiers, merchants, or palace attendants. You realize that the barber is humming again. It's the same tune you heard earlier today from The Man with the Walnut Sack. You wonder if all barbers learn it at some secret guild initiation ceremony. There probably wasn't an actual initiation, but there were guilds, and powerful ones at that. In major Ottoman cities, barbers organized into professional guilds known as esnafs. These weren't just clubs. They were structured organizations with dues, codes of conduct, apprenticeships, and even spiritual patrons. Your barber. He might technically report to a guild elder, someone who decides if he's allowed to raise prices or take on a new apprentice. These guilds also took part in public processions. Imagine dozens of barbers marching through the bazaar with razors tucked into sashes, shouting playful slogans, throwing rose petals into the crowd. Not your average parade, but one that made it very clear. We are essential. We are proud. We will trim your beard with or without your drama. Historians still debate the influence these guilds had politically. Some argue they were merely ceremonial, while others suggest barbers quietly shaped city politics through their vast networks of clientele. After all, if you shave the mayor, the imam, and the fishmonger who sells to the palace kitchen, you know things. And barbers knew how to keep things discreet. There's a term some Ottomans used, sessiz danishman, or silent advisor. It applied to people like barbers who heard everything, but said very little, like shadows that knew your secrets and asked nothing in return. The lather sits thick, on your skin now, cooling slightly in the breeze coming from the open window. The barber's fingers move lightly, pressing just enough to spread the foam, but not so much that it feels rushed. He works slowly. He's not just shaving you, he's watching you. "You look tired," he murmurs. You don't answer. That's part of the magic. In here, you're not obligated to speak. Ottoman men came to these spaces not just for physical upkeep, but for emotional maintenance. The world outside was chaotic. Wars, taxes, marriages, pestilence, unexpected poetry duels. Inside the barbershop, life shrunk down to soap, steam, and a blade that could either heal or hurt, depending on the hands that held it. You notice a poster on the wall, a painted scene of two barbers standing in front of a mosque, one with a razor, the other with a bandaged hand. It's probably a local tale, or maybe a reminder that a barber, like a good friend, must sometimes cut you in order to heal you. Next to you, a man sits quietly, while his nose hairs are trimmed with tiny silver scissors. The process is almost sacred. Neither laughs. Both understand the gravity of what's happening. You stifle a chuckle. A child enters, perhaps 6 or 7, clutching a single coin and looking serious beyond his years. The barber nods solemnly and gestures him toward a low stool. It's time for his first trim. The room softens. Everyone lowers their voices. Because this moment, is a rite of passage. The child is given a piece of fig candy to bite down on, while his fringe is snipped. No shaving cream yet, no razors. Just a careful snip along the ears, a gentle comb to the forehead. His father watches, eyes misty, pretending to inspect the window pane. You've seen this before, but it still gets you. In Ottoman culture, barbers sometimes perform these rites for free as acts of community goodwill, especially for orphans or sons of fallen soldiers. It wasn't charity, it was duty. You didn't need a law to tell you to care for your neighbors. You just needed a warm towel and a steady hand. The barber returns to you, now rinsing your jawline with warm water poured from a bronze jug. It trickles slowly, deliberately. You think of a stream you once waded through as a boy, ankle deep, full of pebbles and tadpoles. The memory lingers, then fades, like the last of the soap down your neck. There's something grounding about the repetition here. Shave, rinse, dry, oil, shave, rinse, dry, oil. The body remembers the order even, if the mind wanders, and wander it does. You think of your uncle's laugh, the smell of pine resin in your grandmother's attic, the time you tried to shave yourself and ended up looking like a surprised goat. That's the thing about barbers. They see your outer appearance, but slowly, over time, they glimpse the inner terrain too. Without ever prying, without ever asking, they come to know your rhythms. When you're happy, when you're grieving, when your silence is relaxed, and when it's a little too heavy. The blade makes one final pass, slow and precise. The barber wipes your cheek, then cups your chin briefly in his hand, a silent gesture, something between approval and reassurance. "You're done," he says softly, "but take your time." And you do. You sit there a little longer than necessary, letting the stillness settle around you like a warm cloak. Outside, a man calls out the price of dried apricots. A donkey brays somewhere near the hammam. Inside, time stands still. Because in this tiny shop, with this gentle stranger and his quiet tools, you remember something rare, that care doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it's in the simple act of being held still while someone shapes the edges of your face and perhaps, just a little, your spirit. You eventually rise from the chair, a little lighter in the limbs, a little looser in the jaw. The towel slips from your shoulders, and the barber folds it with the precision of a man folding a prayer mat. You nod your thanks, and he returns, it with a glance that says, "I've already seen what you're trying not to say." The streets are livelier now, children chasing pigeons, a donkey cart bouncing over uneven cobblestones. the scent of cumin and baked bread drifting from a bakery nearby. But your attention drifts inward again, tugged back to the quiet intimacy of the barbershop. You've begun to notice something that was always there, subtle but unmistakable. That these barbers don't just keep secrets, they absorb them. A barbershop, especially in the Ottoman world, could be as much a confessional as it was a grooming station. The moment a man leaned back and let another man hold a blade to his neck, something else often spilled out. Regrets, hopes, even fears he wouldn't admit aloud to his own brother. And this discretion wasn't a coincidence. It was cultivated. You walk now toward another shop, this one nestled beneath a fig tree, partly hidden by woven carpets drying in the sun. The inside is darker than the others, shaded and cool, almost cave-like. The mirror on the wall is cracked, but polished to a flawless shine. The barber here greets you with a whisper instead of a welcome. A quiet nod. You feel as though you're entering a library, not a barbershop. The only sound is the drip of a water basin and the faint scrape of a razor being honed. This is where men come to speak softly and be heard more loudly than they ever could at home. There are no chairs lined up here, just one solitary stool and a row of pegs holding coats. A small tea tray rests in the corner, untouched, as though too much clinking would be disrespectful. You sit without being asked. The barber begins his work without a word. Warm water, a cloth dabbed lightly under your chin. You don't realize how tense you are until his fingers press behind your ear and your shoulders suddenly release. He hasn't asked what's wrong. He never does. But somehow, by the time the first swipe of the razor passes your skin, you find yourself muttering something about your friend, the one who left for Tripoli without saying goodbye. How the silence between you still aches. The barber doesn't pause. He doesn't comment. He simply makes another clean stroke and nods, almost imperceptibly. That's all. That's enough. In Ottoman communities, especially among older generations, barbers were known to be repositories of unspoken truths. A man might confess to neglecting his prayers. Another might admit to hiding a coin from his wife. One might weep quietly while the barber trimmed the hairs of his ears. The barbers never judged. They didn't offer counsel unless it was solicited. And even then, it was usually wrapped in a proverb. Don't sweep a wound with the same broom that dirtied the floor, one might say. And you'd sit there wondering what it meant, until later that night, when it suddenly made perfect sense. Historians still argue whether this emotional barber role was an intended part of Ottoman life, or if it emerged naturally over time. But what is clear is that in a world where men were expected to be stoic, measured, and composed, the barbershop became one of the few places where that mask could quietly slip. And for many, it wasn't just emotional privacy that mattered. It was social protection. Secrets shared in the barber's chair didn't leave the shop. Not because of formal rules, but because of an unspoken code. If a barber betrayed a client's trust, his business would wither faster than figs in the summer sun. Reputation was everything, and silence, the sharpest tool he had. You think back to the man with the crooked smile you saw earlier, the one who whispered something to his barber while pretending to drink tea. He looked lighter when he left. And now, sitting here with your own skin fresh and bare, you begin to understand why. The barber places his palm gently on your shoulder before reaching for the rosewater. His touch says, "I heard you," even if you hadn't meant to say anything at all. There's another layer to this too. In some parts of the Ottoman world, particularly in tight-knit neighborhoods, the barber acted as a kind of unofficial go-between, a mediator. If two men had a falling out, one might visit the barber and casually mention it. A few days later, the other would show up. And somehow, over the course of a few shaves, tensions eased. It wasn't magic. It was emotional geometry. The barber drew people together in angles they couldn't quite manage on their own. And sometimes he just listened. A lost art, really. You glance at the mirror. Your face looks the same, technically, but somehow It feels different, softer, a bit less burdened. You touch your chin, not because you need to, but to ground yourself. The barber sets his tools down quietly and brings you a cup of water. Not tea, just cool, clean water. You take it like it's holy. He says nothing. You say nothing. But as you stand to leave, you offer the smallest smile, and he returns it. You walk out into the world again, the sun higher now, and the breeze cooler than before. Somewhere in the distance, a minaret casts a long shadow across the square. You turn a corner, heart just a little lighter, and wonder how many men have left that shop feeling the exact same way. You turn onto a livelier street, your feet echoing gently over the time-polished stones as the city stirs with early afternoon rhythm. Market stalls brim with oranges and silks, and above you, laundry sways like flags from 100 different small countries. But even in this colourful swirl, your mind remains on something smaller, something personal, the shape of a beard. You chuckle at yourself, but yes, today it feels like everything has meaning, including how someone trims their beard. And here, in the Ottoman Empire, that shape wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a message, a quiet one, but loud enough if you knew how to read it. A full, thick beard with square corners. That could signal a man of the mosque, a scholar or imam. A sharp-edged, pointed beard. Possibly a Sufi or a man with mystical leanings. A pencil-thin mustache resting on the lip without a beard. That was often the mark of a janissary officer or someone in the service of the state. Even sideburns had their say. You pass another barbershop now, this one with no sign, just a curling ribbon of smoke rising from inside, and the gentle clink of ceramic cups. The door is open, and from your angle, you can see a man halfway through a beard trim, gesturing wildly with one hand, while the barber tries to hold his head still with the other. Inside, a debate is unfolding. Something about whether it's proper to trim a beard down to the jaw or whether letting it grow naturally was a mark of deeper piety. This is not an uncommon scene. Ottoman barbershops were places where theology and fashion collided, usually at the tip of a scissor. One older man waves a finger and says, "The Prophet had a beard down to here," pointing somewhere near his chest. Another says, "Yes, but he also used a comb. Are you using one, Mehmet?" A round of laughter follows. The barber wisely says nothing. Historians still argue about how tightly religious authorities controlled these styles. Some regions enforced facial hair codes more strictly, while others allowed for individual interpretation. The truth lies somewhere between official doctrine and local flavour. You remember hearing about an incident in 1640s Cairo where a barber was fined for trimming a beard in a style considered too frivolous by a visiting judge. But then, a week later, the same judge returned, incognito, for a little frivolity himself. The barber never said a word, but he raised his prices. What's remarkable is how much the barbers themselves participated in this conversation. They weren't just passive tools. Many had strong opinions on what beard suited what face, what shape carried which connotation. You didn't just sit and point at a picture. You sat, and the barber looked at you, read your mood, your status, maybe even your intentions for the day, and then he shaped your beard to match the man you were pretending to be. That's the real artistry. A good barber didn't just trim your beard, he sculpted your image. Some men walked in angry and came out looking thoughtful. Others arrived timid and left with cheekbones sharp enough to slice through family gossip. There's a tale, passed down in Istanbul, of a barber named Kemal, who was known for transforming scoundrels into saints with nothing but a razor and a bit of rosewater. No one knows if Kemal was a real person or just a legend shared to comfort mother-in-laws, but his story lives on. You pause now at a fountain, watching as a young man rinses his face in the cool water. He catches his reflection in the marble and straightens up, smoothing his barely there beard. He looks nervous, like someone about to propose marriage or go to court. Possibly both. His face isn't just a face today, It's a canvas of intention. In the Ottoman Empire, even the absence of a beard said something. A clean-shaven man might be a dervish, someone rejecting material vanity, or he might be preparing for a special occasion, a wedding, a public apology, or an important meeting. A fresh shave wasn't just tidy, it was symbolic. You remember a story told by an old barber in Thessaloniki. A man had come in, requesting a complete shave. Head, beard, everything. Gone. "I want to start over," he said. The barber didn't ask why. He simply nodded, heated the water, and did the job. 3 days later, the man returned, with a smile, and a coin larger than the shave had cost. "Thank you," he said. "I needed to leave someone behind." There's a quiet kind of therapy in that. You're passing another shop now, where a mirror leans precariously on a hook, and the chair wobbles like it survived a small earthquake. And yet, the client looks perfectly at peace, the barber's hand steady, despite the creaks and squeaks of aging furniture. It's not the tools that matter, it's the ritual. Beards, of course, weren't just about personal identity. They could reflect class, geography, even political leanings. A neatly groomed beard might align you with the palace elite, while a fuller, wilder one might suggest provincial pride, or even defiance. There was a time when certain mustache styles were banned in court. Another time when foreign diplomats mocked Ottoman facial hair in their reports, only to return home and imitate it a year later. Fashion is fickle, but razors are timeless. You find a bench under a fig tree and sit. A passing cat brushes your boot, then continues on like it's seen this exact moment play out 100 times before. You touch your own face, still smooth from the morning's shave. You wonder how many messages you've unintentionally sent into the world today, how many whispers your jawline has carried. You think about all the faces shaped today, all the beards trimmed or left to grow wild, each one a tiny flag of selfhood fluttering in the breeze of a vast empire. And somewhere, a barber is still sharpening his blade. You leave the fig tree behind and wander into a quieter part of the city, where the air is heavy with the scent of roasted chestnuts and old stone. A catnap sort of silence hangs between buildings, broken only by the soft clink of copper cups and the whisper of distant conversation. Down one alley, a modest barbershop nestles between a calligrapher's studio and a seller of second-hand boots. It has no sign, no decoration, just a curtain drifting lazily in the doorway, like it's trying to decide whether to welcome you or keep you out. You step inside. This shop is different. No fancy basins, no display jars of herbs or oils, just a single mirror nailed into a wooden wall, a low stool, and a small bench where a pair of slippers rest. But what catches your eye isn't the simplicity, it's the barber's toolkit, laid out like a soldier's gear before battle. There's the razor, of course, its steel blade shining with use, not polish. Then there's the brush, a bit frayed but still proud. But beyond that, you see things you didn't expect. A thin iron probe, a needle tucked in beeswax, a flat spoon-like device, and an odd curled scalpel that looks more like something from a dentist's nightmare than a grooming kit. The barber, a wiry man in his 50s with a thoughtful frown and ink-stained sleeves, sees you looking and gives a small smile. "Tools of the trade," he says, "and the listening." He waves you over to the stool and sets to work, starting with the brush. "No shaving today," he says. "Let's clean the pores instead. Your skin's telling me it's tired." You blink. Your skin's never been particularly chatty before, but you go with it. And so begins one of the lesser-known rituals of the Ottoman barber, facial cleansing and pore work. Not the scented luxury you might expect in a palace, but an almost medical routine. He dabs your face with hot water, scrapes gently with the spoon-shaped tool, then holds a cold compress, laced with alum against your temple. Barbers like this weren't just stylists. They were caretakers of the skin, custodians of the face. And just like they handled your hair and beard with care, they also knew how to soothe the small things. Itchy scalps, ingrown hairs, sunburnt cheeks. And while he works, the barber listens. That's the real tool he uses, Not the razor, not the comb, but his ears. You talk, without even realizing it. First about your friend's lost goat, then your neighbor's wedding. Then, somehow, the time you thought of leaving the city for the coast, but didn't. You don't know why you're saying any of it. You just... Ottoman Barbers developed this craft over generations. The art of opening a man up without ever asking a single question. They knew when to hum softly, when to grunt in agreement, when to pause mid-shave to let a sentence unfold, and sometimes they didn't speak at all. They let the rhythm of the razor or the motion of the cloth fill the space until it was safe to say something out loud. This shop, simple as it is, feels like a sanctuary. There's no judgment in the crooked mirror, no expectation in the creaking floorboards. Just a man with a towel and a small pot of cooled clay paste, smoothing it gently over your cheeks. You ask him if he gets tired of hearing people's problems. He smiles. No, I just file them away, like trimming a beard. You hear too much, it gets tangled. Historians still debate how consciously Ottoman barbers cultivated this therapeutic role. Was it learned, taught, or did it just emerge from necessity? Because when a man has to sit still with his chin in someone else's hand, he'll start talking eventually. Some records suggest apprentice barbers were trained to observe body language first, not technique. To notice when a man flinched at a certain phrase. To remember who showed up after funerals. To see who avoided eye contact when asked how business was. That's what makes these barbers part doctor, part friend, part shadow. They know things without being told. And they remember without ever writing anything down. Your face tingles now, cool and refreshed. The barber hands you a cloth and says, "You're lighter now." And you are. Not just your skin, but something deeper. A tension you didn't know you carried. Before you leave, he shows you something. A small leather book, bound with string, pages yellowed with age. Inside, tiny diagrams, faces, ears, beards, each with lines drawn like constellations. Pressure. Points, he says. Places where sorrow sits. You ask if it's medical. He shrugs. Depends on who you ask. The Sufis say you carry grief in the eyebrows. Doctors say it's nonsense. Me? I just listen to the face. You close the book and hand it back. You won't forget it. Outside, the light has changed. The air is quieter. You walk back toward the main road, but your pace slows. Everything feels softer, more aware. You pass another man on the street. He's freshly shaved, beard-lined to perfection, the scent of clove trailing behind him. He catches your eye and gives a nod. Not a greeting, a recognition. You've been seen too, and just like that, you realize that in this city of marble domes and echoing prayers, one of the most sacred places is a chair, a towel, and a man who knows how to listen. You've been shaved already today, he continues, glancing at your jawline. But your heart hasn't been trimmed. Sit. You sit. And thus begins the barber's lesser-known, occasionally scandalous role, matchmaker, and, when needed, divorce. Coach. In tight-knit Ottoman communities, barbers often knew the comings and goings of every household, who had daughters of marrying age, who had sons with steady jobs, who had feuds so long-standing they'd forgotten the original insult. While imams handled the formal side of marriage, it was often the barbers who did the delicate pre-screening. Sometimes it was subtle, a well-timed comment during a trim. You know, the baker's daughter has a smile like almond syrup. Other times, it was more intentional, like inviting two lonely clients to appointments that just happened to overlap. Historians still argue how widespread this matchmaking role truly was. Some claim it was exaggerated over time, romanticized in folk tales and bedtime stories. Others point to records and letters where people actually thanked their barbers for interventions of the heart. You shift in your seat as the barber begins inspecting your cuticles. He doesn't ask questions, he states things. You've been thinking about her for a while. You frown. She knows, he adds. You stare at him. She's also furious, but not forever. And somehow you believe him. He pulls out a short blade. Not for your face this time, but for your nails. He files them gently, the way someone might polish a stone before placing it in a ring. A man shouldn't approach love with jagged fingers, he mutters. It says you don't know how to handle fragility. You want to laugh, but you don't. He's right. You ask him how many couples he's brought together. More than my fingers, he says, flexing both hands. Less than the hairs I've swept up. That's a wide range, but he's not bragging. And then, almost as an afterthought, he pulls a thin cord from a drawer. At each end are 2 glass beads, tied together with a faded red thread. Take this, he says. If you return it, you're married. If not, I'll assume the worst and change your file. You have no idea what he means by file, but again, you nod. Barbers weren't just about beginnings. They were also present at ends. When a man's marriage fell into a storm, it wasn't the judge he went to first. It was often the barber, to vent, to cry, to ask if he'd made the right choice. The barber listened, maybe nodded, maybe poured strong tea and offered a proverb like, 2 donkeys tied at opposite posts cannot plough the same field. You continue walking with that familiar post-shave clarity, skin slightly tighter, thoughts slightly looser. A few streets over, the noise picks up again. You hear tambourines from an alley wedding, the bark of a fruit vendor proclaiming his melons to be blessed by prophets, and a rooster that seems to be terribly lost in both time and location. And then, as if by fate or invisible nudge, you stumble into a conversation mid-bloom. 3 men sit outside another barbershop, sipping tea from tulip-shaped glasses. One gestures with his spoon and says, "No, no, what he needs isn't advice. He needs the barber." The others nod solemnly, as if this is an indisputable fact. You stop, pretend to adjust your sandals, and linger nearby. The shop behind them has curtains drawn, but the door is ajar. Inside, the soft clatter of scissors echoes like a heartbeat. One of the men spots you and grins. "Looking for a match?" he asks. "Or trying to leave one?" You raise an eyebrow. "Go in," he adds with a smirk. He's good with both. You enter cautiously. The shop smells like coriander and worn leather. A faded green chair sits in the center like a throne that's seen too many kings. And behind it, the barber, a tall man with wiry grey hair and half-moon glasses perched low on his nose, looks up and says, "You're not here for a shave." You blink. Sometimes the barber gave advice. Sometimes he just gave a better beard line and sent the man home looking like someone new. The idea wasn't always to fix things. It was to prepare the man for whatever came next, with dignity, with clarity, with a fresh jawline. You sit now, watching the barber as he oils your fingernails with something floral and strange. It smells like lemon, but sharper. "This helps. You hold on to things," he says, "but only the things worth holding." Out front, the 3 men are still talking, though now the conversation has shifted to the price of saffron and whether goats have emotions. You're not sure which side you agree with. Inside, the barber finishes the final touch, a tiny dab of cologne behind each ear. "In case she leans in," he says softly, "or in case you need her to." You stand, not quite ready to leave, but knowing you must. As you turn to go, he says, "She's angry, not absent. There's a difference, and the fruit seller next door owes her a favor." You exit in silence, the door creaking behind you. The world feels different again, not because it's changed, but because you have. A little more polished, a little more prepared, and somewhere behind you, a barber crosses your name off one list and adds it quietly to another. You walk slowly this time, not because you're tired, but because the city seems to be revealing itself in a new light, gentler, softer, like the world has been freshly rinsed with rosewater. The market has begun to thin. The air has taken on that lazy, late afternoon weight. But even in the fading bustle, your mind keeps circling back to one thought. How does he know everyone? The barber. Not just the one with the love advice or the old man who used leeches. All of them. Every shop you've stepped into today, every stool you've sat on, they've all held a barber who speaks as if he's read the private scrolls of your life. And it's not just you. He knew about your friend's broken engagement, your brother's gambling debt, your neighbor's cat's sudden return. You're starting to suspect that if you stayed long enough, your barber might even casually mention what you had for breakfast. This is no accident. In the Ottoman Empire, barbers were more than service providers. They were the unofficial nerve center of local society, the street's memory, the alley's archivist. You weren't just another client. You were a thread in a vast, tightly woven web, and the barber was its weaver. You step into another shop. Now, one you've passed dozens of times but never entered. This one feels busier. 3 chairs, a mirror stretching across the back wall, and shelves packed with tin containers and polished wooden combs. The air smells like sumac and warm towels. Young apprentice, barely old enough to shave his own chin, waves you toward a seat. His eyes are eager, uncertain. But before he can step forward, the master barber appears, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I'll take this one," he says. He knows your name before you say it. You blink. He shrugs. "Yusuf told me about you, from the fig tree shop." You haven't even told Yusuf your name. As he begins to drape the cloth around your shoulders, he starts listing names you haven't heard in years. Your cousin Hassan, he was here last week. Looks thinner, still lies about his spice sales. You laugh. Then he adds, "Your friend Ayla, she came by in spring, asked for sandalwood, didn't buy it." You go quiet. This is the part no one explains, that every Ottoman barber wasn't just a man with a razor. He was a storyteller, a recorder, a quiet observer who stitched together the threads of the neighborhood with the precision of someone who understood that truth often arrives, wrapped in silence. He begins the trim. Nothing fancy, just cleaning up the edges. But the conversation flows easily. He knows who's been dismissed from the palace kitchens. He knows whose mother-in-law faked an illness to cancel a wedding. He even knows that the fishmonger, Mehmet, isn't actually selling fresh fish. He's just soaking them in rose water and praying no one notices. How do you keep track of it all? You ask. The barber doesn't pause. I don't. He tilts your head gently, brushes hair from your ear. It's the shop. They bring their stories in with the dust. I just sweep carefully. It sounds mystical, but it's more practical than you think. In a time without newspapers on every doorstep, without phones to buzz your secrets into the night, barbershops were the distribution hubs of the spoken word. If the neighborhood was a body, the barbershop was the bloodstream. Historians still debate how structured this system was. Were there unwritten rules for what could be shared and what stayed behind the mirror? Or was it simply understood? The barber is your confessor, but he's also your neighbor. He will listen, but he will also protect. You ask if he's ever slipped, shared, something he shouldn't have. He smiles sadly. Once, when I was young, said too much to the wrong ears. You ask what happened. I shaved with silence for 3 years after that, he says, sharpening the razor gently. Not a single word. You believe him. Outside, you hear the call to prayer drift lazily across the rooftops, echoing between stone walls and citrus trees. The barber doesn't rush. He wipes your cheek with a towel, combs your hair back gently, and sets the blade down. You don't want to stand up just yet. This happens more than you'd expect. Some men sit longer than needed. Some pretend to count coins slowly. Some ask needless questions about beard oil or face creams they'll never buy. Because the moment they step out of that chair, they're back in the world. And the world is louder, harder, less forgiving. But inside the shop, time is tender. Shaving is sacred, and the man behind the blade knows more about you than your own reflection. Before you leave, the barber reaches into a drawer and hands you a folded piece of paper. It's old, worn at the corners. You open it. It's a short list of names. People you haven't seen in years. Next to each name is a single note. Still proud. Regrets the letter. Bought your favorite figs. You look up at him. He nods. Sometimes, he says, people don't come back for a shave. They come back for a second chance. You fold the paper slowly, tucking it into your pocket, like a blessing. The razor may have cleaned your face, but that list, those words, have trimmed something else entirely. You leave the shop with your steps a little steadier. And somewhere, beneath the hum of prayer and plum vendors, you hear the gentle strop of a razor being sharpened for the next man with a secret. You walk now without really choosing a direction, as if the streets are guiding you, not the other way around. The sun hangs lower, brushing the rooftops in amber. Somewhere, a group of children is chasing a wheel with a stick, their laughter bouncing off the stone like sparrows startled from a tree. Your mind drifts to something you'd noticed earlier, the quiet figure in every shop, always standing slightly to the side, always watching, the apprentice. You hadn't given them much, thought at first. They barely spoke. They held towels, fetched water, swept hair into neat little piles with woven brushes. One boy you remember was so still, you nearly forgot he was human. Another met your gaze briefly before looking down, eyes full of something, between curiosity and awe. And now, your feet lead you toward a smaller barber shop tucked beside a crumbling stone oven. Its door is open, and a boy leans against the frame, one foot flat against the wall, arms crossed. He doesn't look at you, but when you step inside, he follows without a word. The barber here is older, his hair snow-white, his hands knotted, like the roots of an olive tree. He doesn't greet you with words, just a glance and a gesture toward the chair. You sit. The boy fetches water, gathers a towel, lights a small brass burner in the corner with dried sage. The shop smells of earth and old books. The shave begins, slow, methodical, but your eyes keep drifting to the boy, the way he moves, the way he anticipates the barber's needs before they're spoken, how he knows exactly when to refill the basin, when to fold a towel, when to step away. Apprenticeship in the Ottoman world wasn't just a job, it was a rite of passage, a slow becoming. A boy might begin at 10 or 12, sweeping the floor, heating water, watching carefully. But with time, years, not weeks, he would learn the rhythm of the blade. The tension in shoulders before a confession, the way a man's face shifts when he's about to cry but won't. Historians still argue over how formal these apprenticeships were. Some cities had strict guild structures, contracts, training periods, even tests. Others passed the art along, like a family heirloom, quietly, slowly, from hand to hand. But no matter how it started, every apprentice knew, you don't just learn to shave, you learn to see, and for years you say nothing. The boy today hasn't said a word, but he's watching, always watching. When your left eye twitches during the rinse, he places a cool cloth on your forehead without being asked. When the towel slips from your shoulder, he catches it mid-fall. And when your expression falters, just briefly, at the mention of your mother's favourite perfume, he lights a small stick of cinnamon bark near the mirror. He knows. Somehow, he knows. The barber, meanwhile, works in silence. His hands never rush, but they're sure, confident. You imagine he's done this shave 10,000 times, maybe more. There's a myth among Ottoman barbers that the 10,000th shave, if done perfectly, grants the barber a dream where he meets all the men he's shaved. They appear, one by one, in a long line. Some are grateful, some are tearful, a few are angry, most are at peace. The barber nods to each in turn, and then he wakes up, not aged, but lightened. No one knows if it's true, but every barber you've met believes it could be. You glance again at the apprentice, who is now brushing stray hairs from your collar. He's probably only a few years from his first razor. You wonder what kind of barber he'll become. Kind, sharp-tongued, silent as his mentor, or the sort who tells long, winding stories while trimming a moustache to perfection. There's a quiet honor in this waiting, in the apprenticeship that asks not just for skill, but for patience. Emotional patience, the kind that can hold silence without filling it, that can wait for a man to speak in his own time, that can know when someone wants advice and when they just need their face cleaned. The older barber finishes your shave with a flick of the wrist, so delicate it feels like someone tucking a blanket over your chin. He hands the blade to the boy, not to use, but to polish. The apprentice takes it like a sacred object, holds it up to the light, nods once. It's a gesture that means everything. I see. I understand. One day, I will carry this too. Before you leave, the barber presses something into your palm. A small coin, copper, worn smooth. On one side, an engraving, 2 razors crossing over a mirror. On the other, the word saber, patience. A reminder, he says simply, to look before you speak, to wait before you cut. You pocket the coin and nod, unsure whether to thank the barber or the boy, or both. Outside, the street is quieter, the children are gone, the shadows longer. You walk on, the coin warm in your hand, and behind you a boy practices folding a towel into the neatest square he's ever made, because soon he will inherit more than a blade. He will inherit every silence spoken in that chair, every story that ended in a single nod, every man who walked in with stubble and sorrow and left just a little more whole. As you walk beneath the lengthening shadows, the city begins to exhale. The clatter softens. The smells change, from spiced meats and roasted nuts to wet stone, to iron, to smoke curling up from chimneys just beginning to stir for evening meals. You pass a bakery closing its shutters, a boy chasing a wheelbarrow that's lost its wheel, and a group of elders sitting on wooden stools outside a hammam, arguing half-heartedly about poetry and pigeons. But then, like a stone in your sandal of thought, a peculiar phrase returns to your mind. Razor politics. You'd heard it murmured back in that last barbershop. A half-joke, a half-warning, and now it rolls around again, when a shave isn't just a shave, but a statement. You spot another barbershop tucked near a mosque courtyard, the kind that doesn't advertise, doesn't sparkle, doesn't even creak when you push open its old door. Inside, it smells like tobacco smoke and lemon, peel. The room is quiet, dim, timeless. The barber is middle-aged, with a face that could belong equally to a merchant or a scholar. He gestures for you to sit, and you do, not because you need another shave, but because something in this shop feels different, more pointed, more precise. He inspects your face briefly. You wear your beard with caution, he says, like you don't want to be mistaken for someone. You blink. It's all right, he adds, smoothing out a towel. Everyone in this city is pretending to be someone else, even the mirrors. And with that, you realize this is that shop, the one where men come to make a decision and let their beards speak for them. In the Ottoman Empire, facial hair wasn't just personal, it was political. The style of your beard could reflect your allegiance to a certain school of Islamic thought, your support for a particular court faction, or even your silent protest against a provincial governor. Some men trimmed their beards short to emulate Western diplomats, shocking their neighbours but currying favour with foreign allies. Others let theirs grow long and wild in imitation of Sufi mystics, signalling piety, defiance, or both. Moustaches carried their own language. A thick, curled one hinted at military service. A narrow, trimmed version might suggest intellectual leanings, or vanity. And then there was the clean-shaven jaw, sometimes a sign of purity, sometimes rebellion. Historians still argue whether these styles were truly enforced, or if they simply evolved through social pressure and imitation. But one thing is clear. A man could say more with his beard than he could with a letter, especially if that letter might be intercepted. Your barber dips his fingers into a clay pot and applies something cool to your chin. "You've walked among merchants," he says, "but you keep the beard of a scribe." He smiles faintly, "which means you ask questions for a living, or you're hiding answers." The blade comes out, glinting softly in the low light. You feel the weight of it, not just the steel, but the meaning behind its use. Because in this chair, shaving is an act of translation. You're choosing how the world will read you tomorrow. He begins with your neck, slow, deliberate, then your jaw, leaving a tight line that's neither soft nor aggressive. Somewhere in the middle, diplomatic, you might say. "This look," he murmurs, "tells people you listen more than you speak, that you respect the mosque but prefer the bazaar, that you fear God but not your neighbor. You stare at your reflection, half-formed, wondering when exactly you agreed to this negotiation of identity." But he's not wrong. In places like Edirne, a simple change in beard shape could cause whispers. "Did you see Osman?" Trimmed his jawline, like a court clerk. Thinks he's someone now. In Damascus, a certain beard line might get you invited to the governor's dinner. In Aleppo, the same line might get you thrown out of a poetry circle. And for barbers, each stroke of the blade was a vote cast. If they shaped a man's beard too closely to the palace style, they might be accused of political favor. Too mystical, they might lose their merchant clientele. It was a balancing act, played on faces rather than ballots. Some barbers leaned into it, even bragged, "I've made the chins of 2 rival poets indistinguishable." Others kept quiet, adjusted their work based on time of day, or waited for political tides to shift before offering a new style. Your barber finishes shaping the left side, pauses. "Do you want to look like someone who forgives easily?" he asks. "Or someone who never forgets?" You hesitate. He continues shaping without waiting for an answer. "You'll forgive," he says. "Eventually, but you won't tell them that." He gives your mustache one final snip. Short, neat, suggestible. "Yes. You look like someone who made a decision. And you know, somewhere in another part of the city, another man is sitting down for the same kind of silent conversation, with the same kind of careful blade, eye of someone who speaks clearly but not often. And with that, he steps back. The mirror reflects someone familiar, but not identical. A little more deliberate, a little less uncertain. You didn't say what you needed, but your beard now does. The barber hands you a cloth, says nothing more, and you pay with a small silver coin and a nod. "No thank you. Not here." In this place, acknowledgement is a quiet thing, earned in strokes and shaped in silence. You step out into the cooling air and catch your reflection in a evening sets in like a silk shawl draped over the city's shoulders. Lanterns are being lit one by one, their flickering glow pooling onto cobblestones and casting warm halos around low doorways. You stroll aimlessly now, carried more by the current of memory than the tug of any destination. Your last shave left, you sharper in appearance, yes, but also quieter inside, as if your barber had trimmed something invisible beneath your skin. And as you move through these closing streets, the hum of conversations grows softer, thicker, and somehow more meaningful. You pass a shop where the curtains are drawn, but the door is open. Inside, 4 men are seated on mismatched stools, each sipping thick coffee from small, handleless cups. The barber is one of them. There's no shaving going on, no scissors in sight. Just talk, slow, looping, poetic. You pause in the doorway, unsure whether to join or observe. "Come in," one of them says, gesturing to an empty stool. "You've got ears, don't you?" You sit. The conversation drifts like smoke. They're not discussing politics or trade, not the weather or who owes whom a chicken. They're talking about a dream one of them had, where he walked into the Grand Bazaar wearing no shoes, and all the merchants bowed. Another man counters with a tale of a turtle who knew poetry but couldn't cross a bridge. They all nod thoughtfully. This, it turns out, is a barbershop too, but not the usual kind. It's a space of reflection, of confession, of metaphor, and yes, of grooming. But today, the grooming is verbal. You sip the coffee passed to you, thick as honey, sweetened with something floral, and let yourself settle into the flow. Barbershops, in the Ottoman Empire, weren't always about razors. Many were cultural salons, where men gathered to recite poetry, debate philosophy, or simply sit together in that peculiar masculine quiet that contains everything and nothing. This was especially true in cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Konya, where barbering and Sufism often rubbed elbows. The barbers weren't just stylists, they were keepers of verse, storytellers, mediators of mood. And if the conversation turned toward mysticism, well, so be it. There was room for that too. One man begins reciting a ghazal, something about the moon and a falcon and a well that weeps. You don't understand every line, but the cadence wraps around you like a blanket warmed on stone. Another replies with a proverb about figs and patience. The barber chimes in with a verse of his own. The blade that knows when to pause makes the cleanest cut. You smile. It's not just pretty words, it's true. There's a rhythm to this space. A shared understanding that not every gathering must be loud to be important. In these barbershops, silence isn't awkward. It's allowed. It's even honored. Someone asks, "Do you think a man changes his soul when he changes his beard?" The room goes quiet for a beat. Then the barber says, "Only if he lets the mirror speak first." They all murmur in agreement. Historians still debate whether barbers actively encourage these gatherings or whether they simply let them happen. Some suggest these poetic circles were offshoots of larger Sufi lodges. Others claim they emerged organically. One man brought a poem, another a question, and soon the shave became secondary to the sharing. Either way, the tradition stuck. And in neighborhoods like this, the barbershop became a sanctuary not only for stubble, but for sadness. Not just for beards, but for the burden of being alive in a world that doesn't always pause long enough for the heart to catch up. You finish your coffee, and someone pours you another without asking. This, too, is part of the ritual. The talk shifts again to love, to death, to the odd fact that geese can fly faster than most horses can run. A man across from you says, "I once fell in love with a woman because of how she peeled oranges, slowly, without waste." The barber smiles. A careful peeler makes a careful partner. Everyone nods again. Not because it's clever, but because it's deeply, weirdly true. There's a comfort here in knowing that nothing said will be repeated, that your presence is enough. No opinions required. No grand insights demanded, just you, a stool, a cup of coffee, and the presence of people who know that a life's worth can sometimes be measured by how well you sit in stillness. Before you leave, the barber walks you to the door and presses a folded scrap of parchment into your hand. "A line from Rumi," he says, "to keep your silence company." You don't open it right away. Some gifts should rest a moment. Outside, the moon has risen, a silver coin tossed gently across the sky. The city glows softly beneath it. And somewhere behind you, the low rumble of laughter escapes the shop like warm smoke. You tuck the poem into your coat and step back into the evening, changed again. Not by the blade this time, but by the quiet. Wisdom of men who know that sometimes the sharpest truths are spoken in metaphor, and the deepest healing happens between lines of verse. You take a winding route through the quieter back streets now, the kind paved with uneven stones and lined with jasmine that leans out from iron balconies, as though eavesdropping on secrets whispered by the bricks. There's a hush in this part of the city, a softness that feels earned after a long day of blades and poetry. And then, down a narrow alley, half hidden behind a stack of firewood and a crooked water barrel, you spot another shop. No lanterns, no chatter, just a single, flickering oil lamp inside and a doorway shaped more like a shrug than a welcome. But you step in anyway. The barber here is neither young nor old. He sits cross-legged on a raised wooden platform, reading something written in a script you don't recognize. He glances up as you enter, says nothing, and motions to a low chair near the hearth. You sit. There's no mirror in this shop, just a smoky glass window behind you and a faint reflection if the light hits right. Maybe this is intentional. Maybe this is the shop for men who don't want to look themselves in the eye just yet. The barber takes a cloth, plain, not perfumed, and lays it across your chest. He doesn't ask what you want done. He just begins heating water. There are no other clients here, no waiting apprentices. Just silence, the hiss of the copper kettle, and the faint smell of ash and mint. You speak first, and only because the silence feels too wide. What time do you close? He shrugs. When someone stops needing me. And just like that, you understand what kind of place this is. This is the shop for emergencies, for nights when a man's chest feels too heavy, when he can't sleep, when the weight of unsaid things gathers at the nape of the neck like steam. In Ottoman cities, especially in the quieter quarters, there were always one or two barbers who stayed open after sundown, not for profit, but for purpose. These barbers knew that sometimes healing wasn't scheduled, that the ache in the mind didn't check the hour before knocking. You lean back slightly, and the barber begins to work. No blade yet, just hands. He presses your shoulders, smooths your temples, rubs something, clove oil maybe, into the base of your skull. Tell me, he says softly, where does the worry live today? It's not a question meant for an answer, but somehow your shoulders relax. You didn't even know they were tense. He places a warm towel over your face. The scent is subtle, sage, maybe a hint of cumin. Beneath the cloth, the world disappears. There's only breath and heat, and a quiet presence nearby who isn't trying to fix you, but also isn't leaving. You begin to speak, slowly, not stories, not confessions, just fragments, words without full thoughts behind them. I miss the ocean. He never forgave me. I saw her once with a yellow scarf, and she didn't look back. The barber never interrupts, never offers wisdom. He just listens. That's all. In some cities, this kind of late-night barber carried an unspoken reputation. Not quite. Therapist, not quite mystic. Just a man who held space, who kept water hot and razors ready and towels folded for anyone who arrived too heavy to sleep. Some barbers even believed in the spiritual side of their work. That sadness lingered in the hair, that bad dreams clung to the edges of the beard, that cleaning the face helped clean the heart. Historians still debate whether this belief was rooted in Sufi practices, folk traditions, or simply the quiet genius of a culture that understood the link between body and soul. Either way, you feel it now. The razor comes out, not flashy, not gleaming, just steady, confident. It glides along your jaw, and the motion doesn't feel sharp. It feels necessary, like cutting away a thought that has overstayed its welcome. The barber doesn't speak again until he's finished. Then, without looking, at you, he says, sometimes, when the weight grows too much for the bones, we must carry it in the skin for a while. You don't fully understand, but your eyes sting anyway. He dabs your face dry. No cologne, no rose water, just a final towel, warm and plain. You stand slowly, as if rising from a place deeper than the chair. Before you leave, he hands you a tiny slip of parchment, folded once, tightly. On it, one word, Yaren. Tomorrow. You nod. He nods back. And nothing more is needed. Outside, the street is hushed. The oil lamp behind you flickers once, then goes still. And in the distance, the first sound of a night bird cuts through the dark, like a lullaby just beginning. You exhale, not because you're finished, but because, for the first time in a long while, you've been quieted. You walk beneath a navy sky now, the kind that's not yet black, but deep enough to make every lantern glow like a secret. The stones beneath your feet are slick from dew, or maybe just memory. You're not sure anymore. The city is quieter, but it never really sleeps. It just shifts tones. And as you move along a narrow path that curves past an old bakery and two dozing donkeys, you spot another shop tucked between shuttered storefronts. This one doesn't even pretend to be grand. Its curtain is made of stitched-together sacks. Its lamp is a bare flame in a glass bowl. But there's something inviting about it, a softness in its humility. You step inside, greeted by the smell of burnt cloves and something sharper, ginger perhaps, or vinegar. The room is small, barely enough space for the chair and a table with folded linens. And standing behind the chair is a woman. She's not a barber in the traditional sense. She's older, with silver hair braided back tightly and fingers stained by turmeric and ink. She doesn't flinch when you enter. She just looks up, like she's been expecting you. "You're not bleeding," she says softly. "So let's see what else is broken." And suddenly, without realizing how or why, you sit. In the Ottoman world, women rarely served as barbers, not in the city squares at least, but behind closed doors, in the privacy of hammams, kitchens and backroom courtyards, women held their own kind of clinic. Midwives, healers, widows who knew how to dress wounds and stir a poultice as well as any doctor. And sometimes, just sometimes, they knew their way around a razor. This woman doesn't begin with a towel or water. She takes your hands in hers and inspects your nails. "Dry," she mutters. "Worried too often and not sleeping well. Am I wrong?" You shake your head. She nods and pulls a small ceramic bowl from the shelf. Inside is a thick paste, golden and grainy. She dips 2 fingers in and gently applies it along your temples and jaw. You flinch at the coolness, but then sink into the chair. "This is for the skin," she says, "but it'll take some of the anger with it." You don't ask how. You just let it happen. In quiet neighborhoods of the Ottoman Empire, especially in the older parts of cities like Bursa and Gaziantep, women healers were often the only accessible care for the poor. And while they weren't officially trained, they carried knowledge written not in books, but in bodies. Passed down mother to daughter, aunt to niece. Historians still debate how much of their medicine was real and how much was ritual. But those who sat in their chairs rarely cared about the difference. Relief is relief. The woman in this shop wipes your face clean and begins checking your scalp. "No lice," she says plainly, but too much thinking. That's worse. She massages something warm and oily into your temples, pressing with knuckles and the edge of her palm. "This is for memory," she explains. "To hold what's worth keeping. To let the rest drip down your back and vanish." You breathe deeply. The scent is sharp, earthy, like soil after rain. You think of your childhood, of your grandfather's voice, of the time your mother combed your hair with fingers that smelled just like this. The razor comes out next, not flashy, not worn, just clean. She works quickly, efficiently, tracing the line of your jaw without a single pause. "Don't talk," she says. "You'll only say something you'll regret." You obey. There's no mirror here, just the feeling of her hand, steady, sure, and oddly kind. Barbers like this weren't always visible. Some were called fixers. They didn't advertise. They were found through whispers. When the doctor failed, when the priest was too far, when the pain wasn't quite physical, but also wasn't imaginary, someone might say, "Go to her." And so people came, in shame, in confusion, in grief. And often they left different, not healed exactly, but reorganized. She finishes your shave and places her hand gently on your cheek. "Your face will remember this before your heart does," she says. You want to thank her. You don't know how. She ties a small bundle of herbs into cloth and hands it to you. Boil it, in silence, then pour it over your feet. No talking before or after, just sleep. You take it. You nod. And as you step out of her shop, you realize your hands are trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the strange relief that comes when someone sees you without asking questions. The night has deepened now. The city hums at a lower frequency, as if tuning itself for rest. And somewhere behind you, a woman sharpens a blade and whispers to the herbs on her shelf. You walk slower. You look up, and for the first time today, the stars feel very, very close. You're moving through a different city now. Not geographically, this is still Istanbul, or perhaps Bursa, or some composite Ottoman dream of both. But emotionally, this place feels deeper, like a layer beneath the surface you hadn't realized. Existed until tonight peeled it back. The streets are nearly empty, but not abandoned. A baker sweeps flour off his stoop. A dog lies curled in front of a shuttered fruit stall, snoring like someone twice its size. You walk as if through a dream, slowed, softened, slightly untethered from time. And then you see it. Another barbershop, though this one is strange. It's shaped like a hallway more than a room, long, narrow, and filled with smoke from a brazier where something fragrant is being roasted. Inside, men sit in silence, not in chairs, but on cushions along the wall. They're waiting, not for a shave, but for something else. You step inside, instinct more than intent. The barber here is young, too young, you think, until he turns and meets your eyes. And then you see something behind them, an oldness that's been folded into his face like a crease in a well-read letter. You came late, he says, but the story hasn't started yet. You don't ask what story, you just sit. This shop is different from all the others. It's a barbershop, yes, but it doubles as a reading room. And tonight, it's become something else entirely, a stage. For storytelling, the barber lights another stick of oud, its smoke curling through the air like a curious spirit. He begins preparing the tools, not for shaving, but for listening. He passes out tea, offers each man a date, sticky and sweet, and then he begins. He doesn't start with his own words. He recites, slowly, rhythmically, from memory, a tale of a barber in Damascus who once shaved a sultan disguised as a beggar, of the secrets whispered between blade and cheek, of how the sultan returned, not to thank him, but to be forgiven. Every man in the room is still. Even the fire holds its breath. You sit back, the words wrapping around you like a warm towel. You begin to see the pattern now, that storytelling and barbering are not so different. Both require presence, both require hands trained in patience, and both, when done well, leave someone changed. In the Ottoman world, this tradition ran deep. Barbers weren't just observers of stories. They were keepers, retellers, embellishers when needed. Sometimes, after a long shave, they'd share a tale as a parting gift, something to carry home along with the scent of rosewater. Historians still argue whether these barbers saw themselves as entertainers or guardians, but one thing is certain. They knew how to pace a tale, how to let a pause speak louder than a paragraph, how to set a razor down slowly during a twist in the plot. The young barber finishes his first story and pours more tea. No one speaks. Then he begins another. This one is more personal, about his grandfather, who used to shave the night guards of the city. He tells of how the guards would arrive tense and leave humming songs, how his grandfather once shaved a man who vanished the next day, leaving behind only a single coin and a note. Thank you for the quiet. There's laughter in this story, and sorrow, and a strange kind of healing that has nothing to do with skin. When the story ends, the barber finally turns to you. Would you like a trim? He asks, not as a formality, but as a continuation. You nod, of course. He wraps the towel gently, doesn't use foam, just warm water and a cloth that smells of anise. His touch is light, his blade gentle. As he works, he hums. Not a song you know, but one you feel like you should. It's soothing, sad, and hopeful all at once. The kind of tune that says, I've seen pain, but I haven't let it win. When he finishes, he doesn't hand you a mirror. He just says, you look more like yourself now. And somehow that's enough. Before you leave, he gives you a folded scrap of parchment. A A story that hasn't happened yet, he says. Read it when you're ready. You slide it into your pocket. Outside, the night has deepened further. A few windows glow with the last blue of evening lamps. The wind has picked up slightly, as if trying to sweep the day into the corners of the city where forgotten things go to sleep. You touch your jaw. It's smoother, yes. But what stays with you isn't the shave. It's the rhythm of the story, the space it made inside you. The way it reminded you that you're not just the main character in your own life. You're also someone in someone else's. And as you walk away, the words still hang in your mind. Thank you for the quiet. The city feels almost hollow now, not empty, but vast. A kind of stillness has settled over the rooftops, like the whole place is holding its breath. Even the air seems to move with more care, brushing past you instead of rushing through. You're not walking anymore, you're drifting. And then, just as you turn a corner near a public fountain, you hear it, the unmistakable zip-zip sound of a razor being stropped. You pause. It's coming from a modest shop with dark wooden beams and a faded red awning that might once have been vibrant. No sign hangs above the door. Just a small metal mirror nailed to the frame, so scratched and weathered it reflects more suggestion than image. You step in. The barber is alone, middle-aged, with a long coat, round glasses, and a strange calmness that makes you feel like you've walked into someone's memory. He nods, says nothing, just gestures toward the chair. You sit. And then he says something you weren't expecting. This one is on the house, but only if you promise not to speak. You nod, and so it begins, your quietest shave of the day. But as he works, you notice something different about the way he moves. He's not performing, not polishing, not even trying to impress. He's doing something else, listening. Not to you, but to everything. To the creak of the floorboards beneath your boots. To the wind tapping softly at the shutters. To the distant echo of a night guard's sandals on stone. And you realize this man isn't just a barber, he's a spy, or at least he might be. You've heard whispers about these kinds of barbers, silent ones who never ask questions but always seem to know answers. Men who pass secrets in coded sentences, or who can carve a message into a beard line no outsider would ever notice. In the Ottoman Empire, barbers were perfectly positioned to gather information. They heard everything: military rumors, merchant, gossip, who left town suddenly, who returned quietly, and they were trusted. You let them hold a blade to your throat, of course you'd talk to them. Some barbers use this position carefully, ethically. Others, not so much. Historians still argue about how many barbers were actual informants versus how many were simply convenient eavesdroppers. But letters found in palace archives hint at more than coincidence. One line, written by a court scribe in 1672, reads, "The barber in the southern district trims more than hair." This man hasn't said a word since that first instruction, but he's watching you, not suspiciously, just thoroughly, as if taking notes in his mind. Your posture, your skin, your silence. Then, suddenly, he speaks again. You sleep on your left side. He nods toward your neck. The hair there is flatter. You don't respond. You've kept your promise not to speak, but your thoughts are racing. What else does he know? You've traveled recently. The dust in your collar isn't from here. You remain still. You've lied today, but only a little. The blade glides across your skin like a feather dipped in steel. The rhythm is soothing and unsettling and strangely comforting. You try to make sense of this. Is he bluffing? Does he say these things to every customer? But somehow it feels personal, as if he's reading. You blink. You like a page he's flipped through before. There are stories, quiet ones, of barbers who worked as spies for the palace. They'd pass information in the form of beard strokes. A single snip above the right ear meant the shipment has arrived. A trim under the chin meant he knows. Even facial styles became codes. A curved mustache might indicate loyalty to a certain pasha. A completely clean face might warn that someone had betrayed their own. And in war, field barbers sometimes delivered more intelligence than letters. After all, no one suspects the man with the towel. You begin to wonder if your name has already been written somewhere. If your face has been described. If this shop was meant for you, or if you just wandered into the wrong story. But the barber says nothing more. He finishes the shave, wipes your face gently, and dabs your neck with a cool cloth soaked in vinegar and mint. The smell snaps you out of your thoughts. Then, without explanation, he reaches into a small wooden box beneath the counter and pulls out a coin. But it's not Ottoman. It's older. Byzantine, maybe. Faintly worn, illegible. He places it in your palm. No charge, he says. Just remember, mirrors lie less than memories. You step outside without a word. The street is utterly still. You look down at the coin again. It glints softly, whispering a history you'll never quite know. Was he a spy? A sage? Just a strange man with excellent observational skills? You'll never find out. And maybe that's for the best. Because in a city like this, where secrets are carried in scarf folds and beard shapes, it's better not to know which barber shaved your face and which one read your past. You walk more slowly now, as though the streets themselves are asking you to tread softly, like a guest in someone else's dream. The silence has thickened, not with fear, but with knowing. That quiet you carry. It's not just because it's night. It's because something in you has shifted. And then, out of the dusk, you hear a sound you didn't expect this late. Music. Faint. Rhythmic. The low thrum of a daft drum. The hush of a reed flute weaving through its pulse like a whispered confession. You follow it. Down an alleyway so narrow your shoulders brush both walls. Past a hanging carpet. A basket of sleeping kittens. A cracked lamp flickering like it's forgotten its job. And then you see it. Not a shop this time, but a courtyard, lit with firelight, framed by crumbling stone and ivy. In the center, a low platform. A man seated cross-legged, holding a razor in one hand and a boy's trembling chin in the other. The boy can't be more than 10, his eyes wide, his legs stiff, but he doesn't run. Around them, a half-circle of men, women, and even a few children sit on rugs watching. No one speaks. No one needs to. Because this is not a barbershop. This is a ritual. You slide quietly onto a corner rug. No one glances your way. The music continues. Slow. Steady. A heartbeat made of breath and wood. The barber raises the razor and holds it in the firelight. Not as a threat, not as a tool, but as an offering. Then, with great care, he begins to shave. Not the boy's beard. He doesn't have one yet, but a single stripe through the soft fuzz on the side of his head. The crowd exhales as one. In Ottoman tradition, certain barbers were called upon for moments like this, not just for weddings or deaths, but for rites of passage, circumcisions, conversions, blessings before travel, and, most tenderly, for a boy's first shave. It wasn't about the hair. It was about the moment a child learned to sit, still, to be seen, to be changed. Historians still debate the origins of these courtyard barbers. Some say they were retired soldiers who took up the blade in peace. Others say they were chosen by local elders, trained not just in technique but in presence, because a blade like this isn't just sharp, it's symbolic. It cuts more than skin, it trims away what no longer fits. Tonight, that's childhood. The boy doesn't cry. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because the music holds him. Because the barber's hands are firm. Because the crowd, silent and warm, is carrying him through. You realize you're holding your breath. The barber finishes the stripe, wipes the razor, and passes it to another man. Older, maybe the boy's uncle. The man kisses it, then lays it on a cloth embroidered with pomegranates. The crowd murmurs a few words in unison. Not a prayer exactly, more like a lullaby meant for bones. And then it's done. The boy stands. Not changed exactly, but acknowledged. There's a difference. Someone hands him a sweet, honey pressed with almonds, and another places a shawl over his shoulders. He beams. You're still sitting there, struck by how such a small act could carry such weight. A single line shaved, and yet it feels like the world shifted slightly to make room for the man that boy will become. The barber now rises, stretching his arms, as if shaking off the gravity of what he just did. And then, without ceremony, he turns to the rest of the crowd. "Next," he says with a crooked grin. Laughter ripples around you. The moment dissolves. The circle becomes a crowd again. Someone claps. A child chases a chicken. A man begins handing out tea. But you stay seated, still inside the spell, because you've seen something rare. Not a haircut, not a shave, but a passage, a movement across an invisible bridge. And that, too, is part of the barber's craft. You step away quietly, leaving before the next customer sits down. The music fades behind you, replaced by the sound of sandals on stone, voices over tea, the low rumble of a cart being pulled home. You touch your own jaw, smooth, now almost tender from so many shaves today. And you wonder, who shaved you first? Do you remember? Was it your father, your uncle, a stranger with kind eyes? Does it matter? Maybe not. Or maybe it matters more than anything. You leave the courtyard with your steps wrapped in memory, each one soft and slow, as though retracing someone else's path. The streets are nearly silent now, only the low creak of wood settling in the beams overhead, the flap of a laundry, line forgotten to be taken down, and the distant knock of a night guard's staff echoing through alleys. The city is asleep, or pretending to be. But some places never close. Not fully, and one of them sits just ahead. A barbershop with its door slightly ajar, the light inside no brighter than a candle, and the air thick with the scent of camphor and old smoke. A place that doesn't call to you, but expects you. You step inside. This barber is ancient, not just in body, though he is bent like a willow in wind, but in presence. The kind of old that isn't measured in years, but in how long he's been listening. He wears a coat patched so many times the fabric seems more history than garment. He sees you, doesn't speak, just points to the chair. You sit, but something's different here. There are no tools laid out, no razors, no combs, no bowls of water or fragrant cloths. Just a stool, a mirror, and a long silence that feels heavier than anything you've carried all day. He pulls up another stool and sits across from you, and then slowly, he removes a small leather pouch from beneath his counter. From it, he draws something you don't expect. A letter, folded, brittle, sealed with wax that has long since cracked. He sets it on your lap. "It's not yours," he says, voice like wood dragging over stone. "But it might be about you." You hesitate. "You came here," he adds, "not for a shave, but for a truth." The room stills. You open the letter. The handwriting is delicate, Ottoman Turkish, swirled and poetic, barely legible unless you've seen this script before, which you haven't. But somehow, you understand it anyway. It's not a letter, in the normal sense. It's more like a list, or a confession, lines written by different hands. A man who never spoke his grief. A woman who shaved her husband before he left and wept when he returned clean-faced. A soldier who pretended to be a baker so the razor wouldn't tremble. A child who laughed every time the blade tickled his chin and kept laughing until the day he stopped coming. You look up. The barber hasn't moved. "They leave things," he says. "Little memories, slivers of themselves. Some forget them, some don't." You ask finally what kind of barber he is. He shrugs. The kind that doesn't cut anymore. And that's when you realize this place isn't about the blade. It's about what comes after. There's a kind of barber found only in the margins of cities like these. Men who once shaved, once trimmed, once stitched wounds and whispered advice. But now they sit and collect, not customers, not coins, but the weight of the stories everyone else was too busy to carry. They're not ghosts, but they tend to them. You hand the letter back. He waves you off. Keep it, or pass it to someone who thinks he's alone. There's a mirror on the wall, dusty and warped. You glance at it, but this time you don't see your face. Not clearly. You see something else. 100 different faces, some crying, some laughing, some with eyes shut in trust, all seated, all waiting, all heard. The barber places his hands on his knees, closes his eyes. You rise slowly, careful not to disturb the silence he has been curating for who knows how many years. At the doorway, you turn. Will you shave again? You ask. His eyes stay closed. When needed, he says. But most wounds aren't on the face. You step out. The letter in your hand is warm now. Or maybe your palm just won't forget its weight. The stars are lower, or maybe you're taller. You walk with a quiet that no longer feels empty, but earned. And as you turn down the final street, a breeze passes you from behind. It smells faintly of lather, old books, and something sweet. Maybe memory, maybe clove, maybe both. The air feels softer now, like the night is wrapping itself around you instead of just resting above. The city doesn't seem to sleep. It listens. Even the bricks in the walls seem tuned to some old quiet rhythm, like they're remembering, along with you. You drift past shuttered stalls, a well-worn prayer rug hung to dry, and a sleeping rooster who clearly didn't get the memo about sunrise. The streets aren't empty. They're simply at rest. Then you come upon a barber shop like no other. It's barely there. No lights, no sound, just a doorway half hidden by vines and an old horseshoe nailed above for luck. You step inside, and for a moment, you're not sure where you are, because this doesn't feel like a shop. It feels like a sanctuary. No chair, no mirror, just cushions, dozens of them, scattered like thought fragments across a carpeted floor. There are no razors here, just books, scrolls, bundles of herbs hanging from the ceiling, a clay jug steaming softly in the corner. And in the middle of it all, a man sits, legs folded, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. He looks up as you enter, but doesn't speak. He simply gestures to one of the cushions. You sit. He pours something from the jug into a small ceramic cup, passes it to you. You sip. It's bitter, warm, earthy, something between tea and medicine. You're the last one tonight, he says gently. You don't question how he knows that. Not anymore. You're not here to be shaved, he continues. You're here to be remembered. You tilt your head. In the old days, he says, the barbers kept more than hair and whispers. They kept faces. How you looked, what you wore, how your eyes moved when you lied, when you laughed, when you finally said the thing you meant. You say nothing. You sip the drink again. He closes his eyes. Would you like me to tell you what your face says now? You nod. He opens his eyes slowly. It says you've been carrying more people than you should, and fewer than you promised. You look down at your hands. He continues. It says you forgive too easily, and forget too, slowly. He pauses. And it says you miss someone, not because they're gone, but because you were never quite done speaking to them. The silence between you stretches. Not uncomfortable, just deep. Like a well that doesn't echo because it knows better. Would you like to forget? He asks. You don't know what to say. He nods anyway. That's what most people want. And then he reaches behind him and brings out a small bowl filled with water. Not steaming, not chilled. Just there. He dips a cloth in and begins to wash your face. Not a shave, not a scrub. Just water, hands, care. Barbers used to do this, he says. After someone passed, before the burial. One final act of care, one last kindness. You close your eyes, he continues. But sometimes you don't need to die to be seen like that. Sometimes you just need a night too long and a silence too wide. He wipes your cheeks, your temples, the back of your neck. You don't know how long it lasts. Time isn't measured here. When he finishes, he hands you a small folded square of cloth for your pillow, he says. It smells of the herb that remembers dreams. You take it, tuck it into your pocket like something sacred. Before you leave, he speaks one last time. You'll forget this room. You're supposed to, but your face will remember. You step. Outside, the vines close slightly behind you, not magically, just from the breeze. Or maybe from the fact that the city doesn't want too many people to find that place at once. And now, the stars above look like holes poked through the sky, letting in something brighter behind it. You smile, not because you're lighter, but because somehow you've been carried, and not just by hands, but by all the eyes that watched you today. All the barbers who didn't need to know your name to know your weight. You walk now with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer needs to be anywhere. The city doesn't pull at you. It holds you, like an old friend who finally lets the conversation pause. Not because it's over, but because it doesn't need to fill every silence. The breeze smells of stone and smoke and something sweet you can't place. Maybe dates, maybe nostalgia. And just when you think the journey is done, you spot something that stops you mid-step. A barbershop still open. But this one is different because you recognize it. You've passed it 100 times, maybe more, always with a reason not to enter. Too busy, too late, too early, too uncertain. You remember glancing through the window once and seeing the barber cleaning his tools in the same way a priest might polish a chalice. Tonight, the light is warm, not bright. Inside, the barber is humming, not to himself, but to a plant in the window. You push open the door. He looks up and smiles. I wondered when you'd come. He doesn't say it like a riddle or a greeting, just a fact, like rain before spring. You take the chair. He doesn't reach for the razor, not right away. Instead, he walks to a shelf, takes down a leather-bound book, and opens it to a page already marked. This one, he says, pointing. You today. You lean forward. The page is blank. You glance up at him. He's still smiling. You haven't spoken yet, he says, but you will. And suddenly you understand. This barber doesn't listen like the others did. He doesn't dig or nod or draw stories from silence. He waits for the story you haven't told anyone yet, and when you're ready, you begin. Softly, stumbling even, but the words come. Not polished, not pretty, just real. All the things you meant to say earlier. To the boy in the courtyard, to the old man with the letter, to the barber who sharpened his razor like it was a memory. You speak for all the times you didn't. The barber doesn't interrupt. He opens a small ink pot, dips a brush, and he begins to write, not word for word. Not a transcript, just impressions, shapes, the curve of your voice, the ache tucked inside a laugh, the line of your jaw when you talk about her. Historians would call this nonsense. No archive could catalogue it. But you know it's true. This, too, was part of the Ottoman Barbers' role, scribe of the unspeakable. There are stories, buried deep in footnotes, about barbers who kept soul books, not ledgers of names or debts, just feelings, reflections, fragmented truths turned into ink before they could evaporate. You speak, he writes, and the world outside keeps its distance. When you stop, he closes the book gently. Not finished, he says, but for now, enough. Only then does he begin to shave you. It's slow, not because he's being cautious, but because he's savoring it, like the final pages of a good novel. He traces each line of your face like a map he's already memorized. He hums a different tune now, one with no words, a lullaby maybe, or a promise. When he's done, he doesn't offer a mirror. He offers a basin. You lean forward and look down, not at your reflection, but into the water. It's rippling. From your breath, maybe. Or maybe from everything you've said. And for once, you don't need to see yourself. You just feel known. Before. You leave! He tears a page from the back of the book and hands it to you. It's blank. You'll fill it, he says, when you're ready. You fold it carefully, like it might whisper back if handled too roughly. Outside, the city has fallen silent again, but it feels like a different silence, the kind that listens. You press the page to your chest and walk, slowly, steadily. And though nothing has changed in the world, you have. A barber shop lit by candlelight, its windows fogged from within. You wouldn't have seen it had you not glanced back just once, as if to make sure the night was still following you. It always is. You step inside. It's small, barely wider than the wingspan of your arms. The walls are lined with old sketches, faces drawn in charcoal, pinned with rusted nails. None are signed. All of them seem familiar, though you can't quite say why. The barber is younger than you expected. He's not trimming anyone, not boiling water, not even cleaning. He's sketching. You hesitate. He looks up, tilts his head. You're early, he says. But that's good. Most people arrive just after they should have. You sit, uninvited, but welcomed. He picks up a razor, considers it, then sets it aside. Not tonight, he says. You've been shaved enough. Instead, he turns the E. The streets ahead feel like a dream you almost remember. You've walked this path before, or maybe you haven't, but your feet know where to go. There's no urgency in your steps now, just rhythm, like breath, like waves. You're not looking for another shop, but somehow you know you're not. Quite finished, and there it is, cell toward you. He's going to draw. This isn't for you, he adds gently. It's for the ones who'll remember you. You don't ask what he means. You know, in certain quarters of the Ottoman world, barbers weren't just shavers and healers. Some were portraitists, quiet documentarians. They sketched the faces of the dying, of the travelers, of the newly wedded or freshly orphaned, not to display, but to remember. To offer the world a face even after it turned away. Historians have found small folded portraits in the foundations of homes, tucked inside. Prayer books hidden behind tiles. They say no one signed them, but the paper always smelled faintly of oil and ash and soap. He begins drawing. You sit still, unsure where to look, how to hold your hands. But he doesn't need you to pose. He's not drawing your eyes or your jaw, or the stubborn bit of stubble on your chin. He's drawing how you feel right now. The hush in your shoulders, the tilt of your head when you remember something you've tried to forget, the stillness you've earned, not been granted. He doesn't speak, he just draws. The only sound in the room is charcoal on parchment, soft and sure. You think back to all the hands that have touched your face today, all the blades that hovered just close enough to demand trust, all the silences that held more truth than a sermon. And now, this final ritual, to be seen, not as you are, but as you've become. The drawing doesn't take long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 10 years. He finishes with a flick of the wrist and a final breath. Then he tears the page gently from the sketchbook and tucks it into a drawer behind him. You blink. I thought it wasn't for me. He nods. It's not. But someone will need to know you existed. This is for them. You want to ask who? He shakes his head. Better not to know. Just live in a way that makes it a kind memory. He hands you something else instead. A slip of parchment with a small drawing. Not of your face, but of your hands. Open, relaxed, as they were while you sat. For now, he says, in case you forget how to rest. You nod. There's nothing to say. You step out into the narrow street, parchment in hand, unsure of its weight. And as you walk, you glance at your palms. They still feel warm, still hold something. something like peace, something like memory. The night is older now, thicker. You can feel it folding in on itself like a well-worn coat. The stars are fewer, or maybe you've just stopped looking up. Not because you're tired, but because you're full. Each step feels like it lands on more than stone. You're walking through layers of memory, of other people's secrets, of your own thoughts that finally stopped shouting and started humming. And just as you pass what you think is the last corner, the final bend before sleep claims you, you hear laughter. Soft, contained. Like someone trying not to wake a sleeping house. It comes from a shop you somehow missed before. Low lantern glow. A cracked window with lace behind the glass. The door is ajar, not wide, just enough to invite someone who's already listening. You push it open. Inside, the barbershop is empty except for one person. She's humming, sitting cross-legged on the floor, braiding strips of dried herbs into little pouches. Her hands are nimble, confident. Her eyes don't lift when you enter, but her smile does. "You made it," she says. No surprise, no fuss. You sit. There's no chair here, just cushions, a bowl of rose water on a table, a mirror turned to face the wall. She finally looks up. "You don't need another shave," she says, "but you could use a closing." You nod, not even sure what that means. She takes your hands. They're warm. She turns your palms up, studies them like a fortune teller without the theatrics. Just quiet knowing. Then she begins, not with tools, not with oils, but with stories. Your stories, spoken softly, as if she's pulling them from behind your ears, your elbow, the fold of your sleeve. The old man who gave you a letter you haven't read, the boy who didn't cry, the silence you didn't break. She weaves them together, not retelling, but reminding, showing you how the pieces fit. And it's not dramatic, it's not magical, it's just clear, somewhere between a summary and a lullaby. Historians don't write about barbers like her, but the oral histories do, the ones passed from grandmother to niece, whispered over lentils and warm cloths. They tell of the last barber, the one who doesn't cut, who doesn't groom, but who closes the circle. You look around and see other pouches of herbs on the shelf, labelled in handwriting so soft it might disappear in the wrong light. Each one smells faintly of something sweet and bitter. Sleep, farewell, healing. She braids one for you, tucks it into your pocket like a parent hiding a note in a child's lunch. "Take this to bed," she says. It remembers the parts you've already let go. You thank her, but she shakes her head. "No need, this was already yours. I just helped you see it." She pours you a final cup of something warm. You sip. It tastes like sleep, or at least like the thing that happens just before sleep. And as you rise to leave, she calls after you, not loudly, just enough for the words to land. "Next time, bring someone you trust." You pause. Look back. "Why?" She smiles. "So they can carry your silence too." You step outside. The city is different now. Not because it's changed, but because you have. The stones remember your feet. The wind knows your name. And the silence, it walks beside you now, like a friend. The night has done its work. There's nothing left to visit, no more shops tucked into corners, no more surprise shaves or cryptic letters or barbers who speak in metaphors. Just the slow walk back, though back is a funny word now. You're not going where you came from. You're simply going. The streets are nearly empty. Only the cats remain, moving with the grace of creatures who've always known how to listen. One sits atop a wall, tail curled around its feet, watching you like it knows your whole story and approves of how you handled it. You nod. The cat blinks slowly. Somewhere in the distance, a call to prayer rises, not urgent, not loud, just present, the kind of sound that doesn't need your attention to matter. You don't stop walking. The shops are closed now. The towels folded, the razors cleaned, and you're not just clean-shaven, you're unburdened. You pass a fountain, the same one you saw earlier, though the water sounds different now. Less splash, more hush, like it's learned your pace. You reach the place you started, though again, it doesn't feel like a return. You rest against a worn wooden doorway, run your hand down the frame, and breathe. In, out. The pouch of herbs is still in your pocket. The coin, too, the folded paper, the memories, all tucked close, like small souvenirs from a long conversation with yourself. Historians still argue whether Ottoman barbers were truly therapists, or if we just romanticize them now. Maybe they were just skilled workers, earning a living one stroke at a time. Or maybe, and this is the part no one writes down, maybe they knew something we've forgotten. That sometimes, the simplest rituals are how we hold ourselves together. That, letting someone hold a blade to your throat and trusting they won't hurt you, is the beginning of healing. That being seen without needing to speak is its own kind of therapy. You turn the key. Or maybe there's no key. Maybe the door simply opens. You step inside. Your room is cool, dark, familiar, but not quite the same. Because you aren't the same. You lie down. Let the pillow cradle your head. Let the quiet slip under your skin. You've wandered through a city of mirrors, memories, and meaning. You've met people who will never know your name, but somehow understood you better than most who do. And now, you rest. Because every journey needs a final breath, and every story needs a quiet ending. So now, slow everything. Let your thoughts settle like dust in warm sunlight. No more walking, no more questions. Just the soft rustle of sheets and the gentle hum of your own breath. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw unclench, your eyes grow heavy. You've traveled far tonight. Not in miles, but in meanings. And that kind of journey deserves rest. If your mind drifts, let it. Let the sounds of the night carry you, like the echo of a razor on a leather strop, or the gentle click of scissors trimming something you no longer need. You are safe now. There are no more stories that need telling tonight, just the quiet memory of warm hands, patient voices, and barbers who knew the art of silence. Let that stay with you. The mirror doesn't need to be faced. The coin doesn't need to be spent. The letter can remain unread a little longer. This moment, this is yours. Let the weight of the world hang on a hook outside your door. Close your eyes, and if you dream, may it be of soft towels, of warm lanterns, and of people who knew how to listen. Sleep well, traveler. You've been seen. You've been heard, and you've been held by history, by story, by stillness.